This training will cover harassment and child abuse prevention. Harassment and offensive behavior. The policy of the City of Shoreview is to provide a work environment free of verbal or physical harassment based on race, color, creed, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, disability, age, marital status, status with regard to public assistance, or veteran status. Harassment is defined as any unwelcome teasing, jokes, or other remarks about someone's race, color, sex, national origin, gender, citizenship status, religion, age, disability, or sexual orientation. Harassment can be pictures or objects that make you uncomfortable, unwanted touching, or conduct that unreasonably affects your work or makes your work environment intimidating, hostile, or offensive. There are a few different ways that we could encounter harassment here while working at Shoreview Parks and Recreation. The first would be over social media. Please make sure that you are not posting anything on social media about your coworkers or about your job here at the City of Shoreview that could be considered negative or harassment towards another employee. Bullying. Sometimes this can happen even between adults that are peers. It doesn't just happen with children. There are times when staff can gang up on other staff and are bullying them and intimidating them, and that could be considered harassment. Sexual harassment. Any kind of unwelcome sexual comments, gestures, or touching would be considered sexual harassment. Staff to staff, that would be two staff members. They could be the opposite sex or they could be the same sex. It doesn't matter. Harassment could be either way as long as it's two staff members or even more staff members involved. And customer to staff would be the other form of harassment. So this could be if you're feeling some unwelcome comments or gestures from a parent or from another guest of the community center. So what do you do if you feel harassed? What we encourage here at the City of Shoreview is to first tell the person that you're feeling harassed by that you don't appreciate what they're doing or saying. If for some reason you feel uncomfortable or unsafe doing that, or if the behavior continues, we encourage you to follow up with one of the coordinators or to follow up with Becky to let them know about what has been going on so that the situation can be addressed. We want everyone to feel safe and comfortable coming to work, and we would hate for someone to leave their employment with the city because someone else was doing something that made them uncomfortable. Child abuse prevention. As someone who is working with children, you are now what's considered a mandated reporter. What this means is that you are legally obligated to report any suspected child abuse. Before the age of 18, 1 in 4 girls are abused. 1 in 8 boys are abused. 40 to 50% of molestations are committed by juveniles. And 75% of cases, the child knows the offender. When you think about both the Adventure Quest and the Summer Discovery program, there are many children in our programs. When you see these statistics, please take into consideration how many kids in our program could be affected by abuse in one form or another. Also, be sensitive towards your coworkers, as we have many employees that work here as well and could also have been affected by abuse in some form or another. There are 4 main types of child abuse. The first is physical abuse. This would be any injury or trauma that is occurred by bodily contact. Emotional abuse is most often verbal abuse or when someone is subjected to some behavior that results in emotional negativity. Sexual abuse would be any unwanted or unwelcome sexual touches or comments, potentially too. And neglect would be failing to properly care for a child. So not bathing the child, not feeding the child, things of that nature. The profile of a typical abused child. Please remember that this is not always the case of an abused child, but this is just an example. So behavior problems. An abused child may have some behavior problems. You may see them acting out, causing more trouble, and this could be because of a situation that they're encountering outside of the program area, or it could even be something that is happening in the program area. Difficulty communicating. It is often hard for these kids to be able to express how they're feeling or what they would like or what they need. They might appear to be different from others. That looks different in many different ways. So when you think about what some people might consider different, it could be that they dress different. It could be that they're overweight, that they have glasses, that they speak with a lisp. It could be a variety of different things. They lack social skills and have low self-esteem. Peer-to-peer abuse. Abuse does not just happen from adults to children. It can happen from child to child. And the characteristics of an abuser in this situation would be that they're physically aggressive, they may be sexually aggressive, and they may have some clinical disorders. So it's important for us, since this would be an area in our programs that peer-to-peer abuse could happen, is that we control the environment. The facility is the space in the building or at the park where the abuse could happen. And it's important that we're making sure that we have open spaces where we can see everything that's happening and not allow kids to be able to hide behind things or be unseen so that things can happen. Kids are very smart and they know when staff are not watching what they're doing, and that is when different forms of abuse could take place. Along with that, it's the activity. So swimming is always an area to be mindful of, as there's less clothing on and more touching that could happen under the water when the staff are not right there, so being aware of that. It could be on the bus when they're in seats and there's not staff right there nearby. So making sure that you're spreading yourselves out on the bus to be able to see those spaces. So prevention policies. We have a few things in place here to try to ensure that we are not allowing any peer-to-peer abuse to happen here in our programs. So we have affection standards, and we go by what's called the grandma standard. And this means that if the child's grandma or mother or an adult in their life walked into the program area, would they feel comfortable with the affection that's happening? So we want to limit the affection from child to child as well as from staff to child. So making sure it's age-appropriate things like high fives, you could do secret handshakes and different things like that, but you should limit hugs, sitting on the lap, anything kind of that nature that could be considered questionable and could raise a red flag for someone walking in or seeing that. Even if it's initiated by a child, we still have to make sure that we step in and perhaps ask the child or gently slide the child off of our lap if they try to sit in our laps, and just explain that you don't have space for everyone, and so we're just going to sit next to each other. So just being mindful of those things and making sure that you still make the child feel respected and not harm them emotionally when you're asking them not to sit on your lap or that you can't give them a hug or something. You can certainly do a side hug, but not any front-to-front hugs. Staff-to-child ratios, we make sure that we have low staff-to-child ratios so that this allows us to be able to see everything that's happening between the kids. Bus policies, as I mentioned, making sure staff are spread out, that we don't allow kids to put towels up on the bus where you can't see them, and that they're sitting upright in their seats. And then rule of 3 is we make sure that we always have 3 people when we're moving from one location to another. So if we have to take kids to the restroom or a different space at the park or in the building, that we have at least 2 kids and 1 staff. So that way it's safety in numbers and it protects both you and the child. Disclosure by a victim. In the event that a child does share with you some things, it could be through indirect hints. They might say things like, my babysitter wears funny underwear, or strange things that just seem unusual for a child to say about a person in their life. Disclosure with strings attached. This would be something like, I'll tell you a secret if you promise not to tell anyone. If a child ever says this to you, please make sure that you do not promise that you won't share something, that you can tell them that they're welcome to share with you, but if it means keeping them safe, you might have to tell someone else. So how to respond. Make sure that you are calm if a child does disclose something to you and says that something has happened to them or someone has hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Make sure that you do not ask them any leading questions, that you only ask questions that they would be able to answer without feeling like you are telling them what they need to say or that they have to say yes or no to you. Leave them open-ended so they can share things, and don't ever force them to share anything with you. Then it's important to make sure that you follow up with documentation. Make sure you write down everything that happened, the date, the time. Make sure you stay with the facts. Don't include any opinions and the who, what, when, where of the situation. It's important to document things, as most cases you do not have enough information on your first encounter to report the abuse. And so it's better to make sure that you're documenting it to ensure that it's not just a fluke case, but that it is something that is occurring so that it can be reported and that we call protective services. At that time, they will want to have all the information that we have of the things that have occurred, and then it's up to Child Protective Services to determine whether or not they will continue to evaluate the situation. Congratulations! You have completed this training session. You will also need to complete the quiz found in the comment section below.